Hello, everyone. We are live. I'm Candace Cornelius, and I am the host of this homeschooling webinar, and I am so excited to have you guys here and to go through some important homeschool training with you. So this webinar is really for people who are maybe thinking about homeschooling, maybe you've started and you're in the beginning, or things just aren't working the way you want them to, and so you want to make a change. Ideally, you have young children, and you have an inkling, an interest in this idea of interest-led learning. You've learned about it, you've maybe read a few things, but you're not exactly sold on it, you're not exactly sure how it's going to work, and if it's really feasible. And you want to give your child a phenomenal education, one that is joyful and that really meshes with their natural learning ability. So if that's you, you are in the right place, and I'm so glad to have you here. So what we're going to do is, in just a minute, I'm going to do a screen share, and I'm going to share with you one of the crucial steps I found to joyful and natural learning. Now, there are 7 key steps that I've identified, but I'm going to share with you some of one of these steps because we don't have time to go through all of them. And then at the end of that, we're going to have our Q&A session. So the presentation I'm going to show you, it's going to be on a screen share. And then we're going to do our Q&A session, and I'm going to be able to answer some of your burning homeschool questions. So let's get started. All right, so as you can see, this is about joyfully and naturally homeschooling with myself, Candace Cornelius. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what to expect. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself so you can get an understanding and feel for where I'm coming from. And at the very end, there is a super special bonus, so be sure to stick around. And we're having that Q&A session at the end. So don't leave out early. So I want to talk to you about my journey to joyful and natural education, because this was not always, the path that I thought I was going to go down. I really never thought I was going to homeschool. So this is a picture of my husband and I when we first got married. Now, this is actually not too long after I graduated from public high school, and I had been gone to public school my whole life, and I really had only thought there was one way to educate a person. There was really only one way of learning, and that was going to school and doing workbooks and reading textbooks and doing worksheets and having exams. And I really thought, that's how you learn. It never really occurred to me that there are other ways to learn. Trust me, I have learned a lot since then. So after my husband and I got married, not too long after, we had our first child and our little princess there. And it was shortly before I got pregnant with her that I first started really thinking about homeschooling. There was an aunt of mine who said to us that she was thinking about homeschooling her child, and I thought that was so weird. I'm like, why would she want to homeschool her kid? But I listened to some of her reasons, and they made a lot of sense. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I really started to study it. And I talked to my husband about it. Come to find out, that was his plan the whole time. He told me that when he was growing up, he begged his mom to homeschool him. He wanted to be homeschooled so bad, and he wanted to give that kind of education to his children. And so this had piqued my interest. I went on, I was in college, and I decided I wanted to homeschool. And so I got my degree in family and education. Now, I learned a lot, but you definitely don't have to have a degree in family education to give your child a phenomenal homeschooling experience. But that was something that I chose to do. And then I really started to just study and dig deep into homeschooling. I read peer-reviewed articles, academic journals about how homeschoolers turn out. I read all sorts of books about different homeschooling philosophies and about what makes education great. I talked to homeschoolers. I was able to sit into homes of people who homeschooled and unschooled their kids, and I got to see, in action what they did. And I just soaked up every blog and all this information I could get. And I was 100% sold on the idea. So I started homeschooling our first daughter from the very beginning. Since she was born, I knew that was what we were going to do. Then after that, I had another little princess here, and now we do have another newborn girl. And so I have 3 beautiful daughters at home that I just homeschool, and it's just the most joyful experience. And I absolutely love it. My kids love learning, and it just happens naturally. I don't have to force learning on my children. It's just this natural thing that occurs. And I want you guys to be able to experience that as well. So I want to tell you about some things I discovered when I was doing all this research and study on what makes education great. And I discovered that so much learning can occur without following the conventional school model. Now, that conventional model includes force, right? Because this is compulsory schooling. They're forced to go to school, and they're forced to study certain things. They don't have a lot of choice. There's just so much force that goes on in school. And there's grades and predetermined curriculum, testing, busy work, textbooks and workbooks, and these strict age groupings. I found that many of these things benefit the institution far more than they benefit the child. That a lot of these things were just created so that the institution could run more efficiently, that it would be easier to manage. It would be easier to compare how one classroom was doing to another, how one school district is doing to another, and that those things are not necessary for children to learn. You do not need force and grades and predetermined curriculum in order for children to learn. Now, this was a big mind shift for me, and it may be that way for you, because like I said, when I was in school, I thought this was the only way to learn. And I quickly discovered that it wasn't. I found out that education can be freedom-based. So much freedom can occur. Things can be individualized to each child. They can make choices about what they learn and how they learn it. That education can be joyful. I used to think that education was something that had to be forced. It was hard, it was dull, and so many people have this mindset that we have to force kids to do this because they wouldn't ever do it on their own. But that's not the case, because it naturally happens all the time. Kids naturally want to learn. If you look at a small child or baby, they learn so much without anyone forcing them to, because it's just hardwired in them to learn. And what we want to do is just maintain that curiosity, maintain that drive to learn. And that learning can be fun. My children have so much fun, and they learn so much. That learning doesn't have to be dull. It doesn't have to happen from dry textbooks and busy work. And that education can be multidisciplinary. It's really only in schools that we have really distinct subjects that aren't related to other things, that we just study math without incorporating, history and geography, and science. Because in real life, all these things are intertwined. If you think about one big idea, so many things are intertwined in that. And we're going to be talking more about that as we go on. Also, education can be fulfilling. We can find so much fulfillment in growing to our greatest potential. Now, there are some common fears about leaving the traditional school model of education, and I want to go through those with you. You may be thinking, do I know enough? Is it hard? Will I get tired of being with my kids all day? Will my kids be weird? Because every homeschooler I knew growing up was weird. Should I leave it to people who have a degree in education? If I let my kids follow their interests, what if they don't learn X, Y, and Z? But my kids won't listen to me. How do I teach things that I don't even remember? Is this going to be a lot of planning? And how will I know what they need to learn? So I am going to ease your mind a bit and address some of these concerns for you. I'm going to explain in detail one important step to providing a joyful and natural education. Because remember I told you in the beginning, there are 7 key steps I identified, but today we only have time to start to go into depth on one of those steps. So stick around to the very end, and we're going to do that live Q&A session, like I said, and we've got some really special bonus. So the step I'm going to talk to you about to developing this joyful natural education is allowing your child to pursue their own interests. Now, when I say this, I mean letting your child exclusively study what he or she is interested in, rather than taking that conventional school model, that public school model, where children are forced to study, hear lectures, do exercises, read textbooks, and take exams on things that they have no interest in. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the benefits to this approach and why it helps in making learning joyful and natural. Because I want you to be able to experience this in your home where your kids just love learning and it just happens. It's not something that we have to force on them, but that they have their own interests and they follow them. And by following those interests, they learn all subject matter. You know, they learn math, history, reading, writing in a way that's really important to them. So one reason why it's so important to let your kids follow their own interests in this way is that it gives relevance to what they're learning. So I want to talk to you a little bit about a high school experience that I had. Now, I told you before, I was in a public high school and I had a goal of going to college. And I wanted to get into the best, absolute best college that I could. So I was doing everything in my power to impress college admissions officers. I was taking the most challenging classes and trying to get the best grades. So my senior year of college, I chose to take this optional chemistry 2 advanced class. Not because I love chemistry. No, I do not love chemistry. It was because I just wanted to impress colleges, right? So it was a small class, maybe about myself and maybe 10 other students. And we were all, working towards this goal of going to the best college we could. And so up until this point, college chemistry did not mean very much to me. It wasn't something I was interested in. I didn't feel like it was important. And it really had no relevance in my life. And I felt like everything I was learning in chemistry, everything that I was memorizing, it was purely for the test and for the grade to get to this different goal that I had. And I really was just trusting my teachers that what they were saying was actually true, because I really didn't know if it was true. We're talking about electron orbitals, and these aren't things I can see. These aren't things that I can touch or experience. And I'm just, kind of trusting that, okay, that this is how it works, And so chemistry was really irrelevant to me. Now, when I started this advanced course my senior year, we started out by talking about medication. And we started out by talking about really common medications like ibuprofen and Tylenol. And suddenly my interest was piqued and I was excited and I thought, wow, I've had these medications before. They're sitting in my house right now. I've taken them. I've felt them work in my own body. And now we're going to break it down into, the chemical parts and how the chemistry works. And I thought that was just fascinating. And suddenly this became relevant to me, that chemistry had meaning to me now. And I had a few thoughts right after that, right after this excitement. I felt sadness right after. And I thought about all of the other students in my high school, all the other seniors who had, learned so much chemistry throughout their public school career, and that so many of them didn't take this advanced class. And so many of them are leaving high school without chemistry ever becoming relevant to them. That it was always just a grade and it didn't have this meaning for them. And then my next thought was, why did they teach me this way? Why didn't they start out with something concrete, something that I was interested in, something that was meaningful and relevant to my life, and then break it down into these more abstract, complex parts? And as a homeschooler, we had the opportunity to make things really relevant and to teach things in their natural context. It's going to be very natural for a child to see something that they can touch and feel and want to learn about it. But these abstract thoughts that they don't understand, it's going to be hard for them to have an interest and a desire to really learn about it when it has no relevance to their life. Now, another reason to allow our children to pursue their interests exclusively in this way is it gets them engaged in what they're learning. Now, Isaac Asimov said, self-education is, I firmly believe, the only kind of education there is. Now, I want you to think about that because we in schools and society, we try to force people to learn certain things, but you really cannot force understanding. And that education, it's going to come from within. I'm going to talk about this a little more later on, but think about all the students in your high school or in schooling that you attended who, or French, right? So much of the population studied French and Spanish, probably throughout junior high and throughout high school. And they have sat through countless hours of that language study, right? And because we're trying to force them to learn this language because we think, that's good for them, right? And think about how many people know Spanish and French in America that didn't grow up with that language in their home, that grew up with English only in their home. How many of them now know Spanish and French because they studied it in school? Now, most people can count to 10. They can ask where the bathroom is and maybe another handful of phrases, but it's because this self-education is the only kind of education there is. We can't force learning. We have tried to force people to learn these languages, but you really can't. And if you're just trying to force them and they don't want it, it's not going to happen. I'm rereading this amazing book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by the legend Dale Carnegie. And, he talked about if you want someone to do something, if you want to influence them, they need to want it. So you need to find out how you can get that person to want it themselves. And we want our children to want to be educated because when they do that, they're going to be engaged. They're going to take responsibility for their own education. Now, also, by letting them follow their interests, they experience joy. They grow to love learning because they feel that learning is joyful. Learning is enjoyable. I like learning. And they discover that it's not dull, it's not hard, and they become lifelong learners because we want our children to learn throughout their life. So many people have gone through this conventional school model for 12 years and then they, continue it on in a lot of higher education institutions, and when they're done, they are just exhausted and they never want to, do that again. So many people don't pick up another book after they've graduated. And we do not want that. We want our children to learn throughout their life and to be lifelong learners. Now, memory plays a role in this as well. So Leonardo da Vinci, he said, just as eating contrary to the inclination is injurious to the health, so study without desire spoils the memory and it retains nothing that it takes in. Oh, isn't that awesome? I'm going to read it one more time. Just as eating contrary to the inclination is injurious to the health, so study without desire spoils the memory and it retains nothing that it takes in. Oh, this is so true. Like I was saying about this language study, we try and force, but if they don't have a desire, they're not going to retain this information, and so much of that time is just wasted when it could be spent learning things that were meaningful to them. and that they could still learn so much by following their interests. They could still learn math and science and history and social studies, but in a way that engages them and that will make it so they retain these things in their memory. So research has taught us that when we are emotionally connected to something, we remember it better. I want you to think about an experience that you had that was high in emotion. Maybe this is when you got married, when you had your first child, maybe you had a near-death experience, or maybe this is when you learned about a terrorist attack. Now, chances are these were times that were very high in emotion for you, and you have a lot of memory related to it. Most of us know exactly where we were when we learned about 9/11. I can tell you exactly where I was. I know where I was sitting in the room. I know where the TV was in position to myself. I know the other people that were in the room. I think about when my child was born. I remember so distinctly seeing her for the very first time, seeing my first child, and it was so amazing. These things are ingrained in us. And so when we let our children, study what they desire and let them feel that joyful emotion that comes with it and those fulfilling emotions, this is going to help them retain these things in their memory. So they don't come out and, think about the show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Right? We've learned all of these things before, but when we go back, we don't remember them. And this is a way to help us retain these things in our memory. There's a book, The Handbook of Education in Memory, Research and Theory, and you can get this book, it's online, and this book goes into more detail about that link between emotion and memory. Now, another reason why this is so important is because we avoid rebellion. Now, I want you to look at this picture because it kind of just breaks my heart because I feel like this is a reality for so many families. I imagine this girl has some homework to do and she doesn't want to do it. She's probably lifting her hand up and looking at her mom like, why do I need to do this? Why is this important? I don't care about this. And this mom who just wants the best for her child, just like anyone else, is just stressed out and doesn't know what to do. And she just wants her child to do her homework, right? And she wants her to be successful and she wants her to learn. And so many parents, they don't realize there's another way that they can teach their children to avoid these kinds of rebellion situations. Because humans desire freedom, from a very young age. Take a toddler, I have a very young child and she wants freedom, trust me. It is natural desire in humans to be able to make their own choices. And so it's important to, let children make choices within, safe boundaries, of course. But it's a natural human reaction for when we push on someone, they are going to push back. And so when we give children the freedom to study those things that interest them, we remove so much contention from our home. Because situations like in this picture are causing so much contention. And we can have more harmony and peace in our home. And when you have a home that's full of harmony and peace, learning is going to become so much better. It's going to happen so much more naturally. And as a homeschooler, you have a unique opportunity to really strengthen relationships with your children because you're going to be spending so much time with them. So we want to be sure that relationships have a really high priority. And by allowing our children this freedom in what they study and how they learn, you are going to remove a lot of this rebellion and help there to be more harmony and strengthen these relationships. Now, Plato said something really great too. He said, "Do not train children in learning by force and harshness, but direct them to it by what amuses their minds, so that you may be better able to discover with accuracy the peculiar bent of the genius of each." Oh, that's so awesome. Do not train children to learn in learning by force and harshness, but direct them to it by what amuses their minds. So this is what we're talking about, right? Not training children to learn by force and harshness, but helping them to learn all these things that they still need to learn. It's not about not teaching our kids math, not teaching them history, not teaching them how to read, but it's about doing it in a way that amuses their minds. Because real life is multidisciplinary, right? So many subjects can be covered in one topic. And when we do this, when we let them learn by what amuses their minds, right? Like Plato said, we can help them discover their unique genius. We can help them discover their unique mission in life, help them to realize their God-given talents and how they can make a meaningful contribution to the world. Because letting them find out what brings them joy, what interests them, what gives them energy, what are they passionate about, how they can use that to then contribute to the world in a very meaningful way. Now, another thing this does is it really rejects conformity. Because conventional schooling, or sometimes it's called this conveyor belt model of education, pushes conformity and punishes those who reject it. If you start to break from the mold, you get punished. You need to learn a certain way in a certain time frame. But in reality, kids learn different things at different times and in different ways. And when we can embrace this truth, right, that each child is truly unique and that they learn different things at different times in different ways, we can stop comparing children. It's really interesting because we often tell kids, don't compare yourself to anyone else. And yet that's what schools do all day long. They use these tests to compare child to child. They compare these groups of children in a classroom to a group of children in another classroom. These children in one school to children in another school. Children in one school district to another school district, state by state, country by country. It's all about this comparing, right? But when we realize that children learn differently, and we can accept that and embrace that truth, then we don't need to compare, because we're letting our child, go on their natural individual path. Because some kids are going to learn things at different times. Kids learn reading and writing and math and all these things at different times, and they learn it in different ways. And that's okay. Because, really our society needs all professions to function. Often schools put a higher emphasis on those who have a strong interest in academic subjects. So if you are just fascinated by science, often that has more prestige in the schooling system than if you're fascinated by photography or ceramics. But truly, you can be extremely successful as a photographer. There's no reason why you can't make a very good living as a photographer, and why you can't contribute meaningfully to the world as a photographer, right? Because our society, we can't have everyone be chemists. We need people who are interested in the arts, and people are interested in music, and people are interested in architecture and cultures and languages and all sorts of things to make the world go round. So we can allow our children to pursue these interests, and they can find out, their unique genius and what they're genius at and how they can contribute. Now, another thing is schools, children come out often being really mediocre. They know very little about several things. And when they're done, they hardly remember anything about several things, just a few main ideas. Whereas when we let our children pursue their interests in the way that we're talking about here, they can become masters at something instead of just being mediocre. They can find out their unique way to make an effect on the world in a positive way. Now, this question was proposed to me once. Could our society produce a Newton or a Mozart? And I want you to think about that yourself. Because I thought about this pretty hard, and it really struck me, and I thought, With the way we try and force children to all fit into a certain peg, to spend all of their time doing what we think they should do, rather than looking at children as truly individuals and tailoring their education to their unique talents. I wasn't sure if we could produce Newton or Mozart. Would Mozart have had as much time to pursue interests in the way that he would have desired, with how much time kids are in school, how much time they're doing school work, and people just want more homework, and they want the school days to be longer and the school years to be longer. And so, children are getting less and less time to find their talents and to really, hammer at their craft, to really perfect it. So furthermore, when you let your children follow their interests in this way that we're talking about, you communicate to them that they matter. Their thoughts matter, their feelings matter, and their interests matter. Now that is really powerful for a child, to realize that how they feel is important, and that it's not just important to them, but it's important to their parents. So this is really powerful. Now this is a quote by a man named John Taylor Gatto, and he was the New York State Teacher of the Year in 1991. And he wrote a phenomenal book called Dumbing Us Down, which I absolutely encourage you to go pick up. It will totally change the way you think about education. And hopefully, we're getting to that here as well. Now, he gave a speech, and this was part of his speech. He said, "Of the millions of things of value to study, I decide what few we have time for. Actually, though, this is decided by my faceless employers. The choices are theirs. Why should I argue? Curiosity has no important place in my work, only conformity." Now, when he writes this, he's pointing out a lot of the flaws in the education system that he sees as a teacher. And I just love this quote because it is so true. There are millions of things of value to study in the world. Why not let the children go after what they're curious about, what's going to be relevant to them, what they're going to be engaged in? Instead of like schools force them to learn certain things. And even in homeschools, many parents buy these predetermined curriculums, and they just bring public school into their home, and they say, okay, this is the chapter we're on, so this is what we're learning today. No, I know you're interested in tinkering on that piano or pulling apart that machine, but right now, this is what we're learning right now. Maybe we'll get to that later. Maybe that's a few chapters down. And they just go by this predetermined curriculum instead of going through what their children are naturally curious in and naturally want to learn. So, and like I said, realize that you can't force learning or understanding. It brings me back to that idea about language learning. We can keep kids in class for hours and hours and punish them for not doing their homework, giving them detention for not paying attention in class, give them failing grades and try to make them feel ashamed and bad about themselves, and maybe give them awards if they do their homework. But that doesn't make people learn or understand. People still come out and they don't know these languages, and it wasn't something that they were engaged in and wanted to learn. Often it's something that's forced upon them, and when we try and do that understanding it doesn't stick. But by doing this kind of model of education that we're talking about, by making learning joyful and natural and letting them follow their interests, we're nurturing this intrinsic motivation to learn. And suddenly there's no need for grades or stickers, prizes, honor roll certificates, trophies, or punishments, because kids naturally want to learn. Think about a baby. Babies learn so much. Before they enter kindergarten, they have already learned so much without ever going to school. And they think about a baby learning to walk. No one has to force them to learn to walk. They don't have to go to walking school, and we don't need a walking curriculum, and we don't need to grade their walking. We don't need to test their walking ability. They are going to learn because they want to. And they are going to get up, and it's going to be hard, and they're going to fall down over and over and over and over, but they want to learn. And so it just happens. And we can nurture that intrinsic motivation within our children to want to learn because they naturally have it. Schools often kind of beat that out of them, and they begin to think that I learn now for grades and stickers and prizes, that I don't learn for myself. But we can change that back and help them to want to relearn again for their own reasons because they want to. Now, some of you might have some concerns with this kind of idea. I can hear some people saying, well, what about gaps in learning? What if my kid grows up and they were never interested in the Declaration of Independence and they never learn what year it was signed? Everyone needs to know that. What about state standards? My area, I have certain laws I need to follow, and they have to learn certain subjects, So what about that? What if they just never want to learn those subjects? Or what if my kids lack interests? Maybe you look at your kid and you're like, my kid doesn't want to do anything. My kid's not interested or curious in anything. Or what if my child never wants to read? Like, I'm just supposed to let my kid wait till they want to read? Well, if they never want to read, right? So let me ease your mind a bit and go over some of these things. So let's talk about if your child seems to lack interest. What I would ask you is, how are you modeling a curious mind? Do your children see you pursuing interests? Do you have a genuine interest in learning new things? Because you are going to be the greatest single influence in your child's life. Children emulate their parents in so many ways, consciously and unconsciously. And so if you can model this curious mind and go after interests, they are going to follow suit. They're going to see that, learning is fun, and they're going to have their own interests as well. Now, what if my child doesn't want to learn to read, right? Kids need to learn to read. I would propose the question to you, why wouldn't he or she want to learn to read? A normal child can see the world and realize that reading is important. We don't really need to tell them this because they can feel the disadvantage that they have when they don't know how to read. They can feel and understand the dependence that they have on others when they don't know how to read. And children want to be independent. They want to do things themselves. And they are just going to want to read. People don't worry and think, well, what if my baby never wants to learn to walk? I have to force them. I have to make them. We have to follow this curriculum because they won't want to learn how to walk if I don't make them. And that's just not true. And it's the same with reading. They are going to want to learn how to read. It doesn't really make sense for why they wouldn't for the normal, healthy child. And it's important to remember that not everyone learns to read at the same time. And that's okay, because remember, children learn different things at different times in different ways. And some children learn how to read at 3 years old. And that's great. Some children don't learn how to read till they're 7. And that's okay too. We all learn at these different ways. And, if our children need a little prompting, we can show them how reading, and this can apply to other subjects, how reading, math, science can help them do so much more with what they're interested in. If your child is interested in dinosaurs, they can learn so much more, and they can do so much more with that interest if they know how to read. And we can help our children realize that. Now, some of you are thinking, state standards. I got to meet these state standards. And it's important to understand the homeschooling laws in your area. And also, you need to realize that it's only in schools that things are isolated into these distinct subjects. It's only in schools where, history or math doesn't touch other subjects, that you exclusively learn about that one thing. Because truly, if your kid is interested in, dinosaurs, there's so much that goes on in there, because real life is multidisciplinary. If your kid's learning about dinosaurs, they're going to be interested in geography. Where are these dinosaurs located on the earth? They're going to be interested in reading, obviously, because that's how they're going to learn so much more. They're going to be interested in dates and history and when these things started. And even just dates themselves are going to help pique an interest in math and so many other things. They're going to be interested in geology and weather and all sorts of different topics in this one idea, right? Because real life touches everything. When you're cooking, you're doing math and reading and problem solving and creative thinking. How can I make this better? How can I make this taste better? And so real life is multidisciplinary. So by letting your children follow their interests, it's not like you're trying not to let them learn state standards. It's not like that you're avoiding mathematics or you're avoiding writing or communication. You're just teaching them in a way that's engaging to them and that's relevant to them. Because, like I said, one interest covers so many different subjects. Now, let's talk about gaps in knowledge. So this can be really concerning to people because they think, well, there's certain things my kids need to know, right? And what if they just never are interested in it? And Candace, if I follow this thing that you're talking about, they might not ever be interested in it, and then they're going to be adults and they are not going to know when the Declaration of Independence was signed. And what I want to say is to realize we live in the information age. We live in a unique history in the world that the world has never seen. One where information is of abundance. We do not have a shortage of information. And so the school system that we're working on was designed and created before this time in history, before the information age, before everyone carried a cell phone in their pocket. Because right now we all have cell phones and we can pull it out and we can click on Google, and within half a second, Google has given us 10,000 answers to any question that we have, right? These facts and figures that schools put so much importance on can be answered instantaneously with a computer, with a cell phone. And so despite that we live in this new age, this new kind of society, this new kind of world, our schools are still functioning on the premise that that isn't the case, and that we still need to hammer all of these facts and figures into their head. If my child gets in a situation where somehow they never had an interest in when the Declaration of Independence was signed, which I don't see very likely considering we celebrate the 4th of July every year in my home, but let's say they did, all they have to do is pull up Google, and in half a second, like instantaneously, they're going to know 1776, right? Now, so gaps in knowledge aren't as concerning to me because that's something that can be fixed and overcome almost instantaneously. But what is concerning to me is gaps in character, because that is far more concerning. Because if they don't remember when the Declaration of Independence was signed, they can find out extremely quickly. But if they haven't developed good character, if they have gaps in integrity, if they haven't developed self-confidence, if they don't have compassion for other people, if they're, struggling with honesty, they're far more concerning. And these are things that are going to take a lot more time to learn. And Google is not going to suddenly punch it in and suddenly you're this, person full of integrity and confidence. These take time. And as a homeschooler, you have time to develop these important character traits in our children. It's one of the really unique and truly important opportunities that we have with our children. So I want you to remember to focus on a love of learning and how to learn. And to realize that when we want or need something, to know something, we can learn it really quickly. And to focus on progression and not speed. Because children are all going to go at their own pace because they're all individual. And so focus on, is your children doing a little bit better than yesterday? And not, is my child keeping up with the girl across the street, right? So when your children turn 18 and leave the home, they will not know everything there is to know. They're going to get into situations where someone else might know something and they're going to be like, what? You didn't know that? And that's okay, because schools cannot teach children everything they need to know, private or public, and you as a homeschooler cannot as well, because there is a lifetime of learning out there. There's always more to know and to learn. But if you can teach your children to love learning and to know how to learn, how to find resources and determine the good ones from the bad, then they're going to be unstoppable. And it's okay that at 18, they don't know everything in the world there is to know, because they are going to continue to learn throughout their life. Now, school has this pervading myth that explicit knowledge is paramount. Explicit knowledge are these fact and figure knowledge, like that Google can tell you. And so, like I said, schools really put a focus on this kind of knowledge. And they do this in part because it is the easiest to assess. This is the easiest knowledge to test on a person. And if they can test it, then they can compare student to student and teacher to teacher and school to school and make these rankings so people can know, which school is better than which one, or who's the best teacher, or who's the best candidate that we should admit to our college. But explicit knowledge really isn't paramount. It just isn't, because we have this information age now, right? And this is a quote from Mitch Resnick from the MIT Media Lab. And he said, pay really close attention. He said, today's education systems are not designed to help people develop as creative thinkers. It is ironic and distressing that at the same time that machines are increasingly taking over workplace tasks that don't require any unique human abilities, our education systems continue to push children to think and act like machines. We need to stop training students for exams that computers can pass. This is so important, because we are trying to get kids to be like Google, to be able to regurgitate all these facts and figures, right? And to be like a machine. When truly Google and machines, computers, are going to outdo me every time. Because humans are not going to be able to spit back in a half a second 10,000 answers to one question. But a machine can do that really well. So for these jobs that need that kind of thinking, we're going to put a machine there, because they're going to be able to do it so much better. But really, we need to focus on these uniquely human abilities, right? Because we don't want our kids to not be able to be employed, or to not be able to, employ themselves or employ others and be entrepreneurs. We want them to develop as creative thinkers, like Mitch was saying. So in Clark Aldridge's book, Unschooling Rules, he talks about 3 kinds of learning: learning to be, learning to do, and learning to know. So learning to be is, learning about yourself. What gives you joy, energy? What unique talents do you have? Then there's learning to do. These are skills, learning how to build a house, learning how to be a good leader, right? Learning to do certain things. And then there's learning to know. And this is that explicit knowledge. And schools focus so much on learning to know more than learning to do. But we as homeschoolers have the opportunity to even this out, to make this more well-rounded for our children. Okay, so time is ticking, and there's so much more I want to share with you, on this topic alone, and so much more on, the other steps to making education just phenomenal, that's natural and joyful. So what I did was I designed a course just for you, Joyful and Natural Learning, because I feel like this is one of the best ways I can help transfer this knowledge onto you, so that you can have this kind of experience with your children, And so I created this course. I'm going to tell you about it. So inside, you're going to discover the 7 fundamental steps to creating a joyful, natural learning experience for your young child. You're going to learn how to educate them without imitating the school model. Show them, discover how you can facilitate meaningful learning without predetermined curriculum, testing, compulsion, and grade levels, and make learning joyful, designed to complement your child's unique learning process. And after years of study, I've cut through the fluff. I've determined what these most crucial steps are. And so this course is really concise because I want you to get to where you're going in the shortest amount of time. I want you to be able to step confidently into this lifestyle right away. And if you're having questions about what we talked about and how I can really implement this, then this course is definitely for you. You're going to find the 7 steps. We're talking about homeschool laws. We're going to talk about having a vision and kind of the big picture of education. You're going to find book lists, video presentations, documents, special bonus just for students inside the course, and just so much more. This is what I yearned for 7 years ago when I first started my homeschooling journey. I just wanted someone to help me, and I didn't know, and I just worked and looked at all these different resources, and if I could have had something so concise and put together, that would have just been amazing. So that's why I created this course. Because lots of things hold people back. They don't have help. Education's a big deal. They don't want to mess it up, right? They don't want to get it wrong for their kids. They feel alone. They don't have a homeschool mentor or anyone to guide them. They're scared and they don't know where to start. But these things don't have to hold us back anymore, because this is designed to help you overcome these specific challenges. Now you don't have to scour the internet for countless hours searching for, guidance on this new journey. You won't mistakenly spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on one-size-fits-all curricula. You don't have to read blog after blog and attempt to figure out what is of worth and what isn't. You can stop thinking about educating your kid and instead, like I said, step confidently into a new fulfilling lifestyle with your family. Learn from a step-by-step guide on how to give your child a phenomenal education and do it right now. You can offer your child an education that's natural and just fills your home with joy. This is the opportunity you have right now. Because I want you to be able to spend more time with your kids, to help your kids find joy, and to help them be more concerned about learning than about grades, to help your kids learn in a way that complements their natural learning process, to provide a customized education for your unique child, and to help them discover their unique mission in life. So here's the investment. So we have our basic package, and in this, you're going to receive the entire course. You're going to get the 7 key principles. You're going to get videos, presentations, documents, and that special bonus about an upcoming community I'm developing. And for just being on this webinar for the next 24 hours, if you purchase and invest in the next 24 hours, you're going to get these special tips and reflection sheets as a bonus. And these are really designed to help you take your learning in the course to the next level. And you're going to get just everything you need to get started right away. So all of this, my heart and soul, my blood, sweat, and tears, after years and years of study, all of this for only $247. Now, I was thinking, if I was putting myself in the shoes of me 7 years ago, and I thought, there's more that I would want. And that's why I made this premium package. Now, space is limited because you're going to get everything in the basic package plus 4 one-hour mentoring sessions. We're going to meet one-on-one via Google Hangout. I'm going to personally guide you through the course. I'm going to be there to answer specific questions to help you apply this course material to your unique family. And I'm going to be there as your personal mentor. Now, this is, just taking it to the next level, because if you're like me, I I was alone. I didn't really have people to talk to. I didn't have someone I trusted, someone who shared my philosophy that I could learn from. And so I want you to have that opportunity. Now, this one is $11.97, and space is limited because I do homeschool and I want to give people ample time, but I can't do it for everyone, unfortunately. So space is limited. So if this is something that interests you and you're seeking a mentor and just going a little bit deeper, then this package is for you. So that's the end of our presentation. So we're going to talk about questions, do our Q&A, what questions I can answer for you about the course or about home education itself. So I want you to start thinking about questions to write, and I'm going to open up that Q&A portion for you to enter it. And a little more about the course. So there is a 14-day money-back guarantee. So, if you're not completely satisfied, you just totally get your money back. And here are some links that you can use to enroll. And I'm going to email you out these links as well, so you can get that right away. I'm going to email that to you ASAP after this presentation. So there's 2 links, one to the basic course and one to the premium. And all right, we're back. So we're going to open up the Q&A session now. So up on the corner of your screen up here, you should see what looks like a white Rubik's Cube. And it's going to be a bunch of little white squares. Now in there, you're going to be able to type in your questions. So you can go ahead and do that. So you click on that, there's going to be a Q&A button, and you're going to be able to type in your questions. So you can do that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put in a link because I also have a homeschool blog and podcast, and I want you to be able to check that out as well. So, and it is breathebelief.com. So in that square up there, you're also going to see, it's going to say showcase. It's going to be some little white papers, and you're going to be able to see that as well. So you can get some great free material there too. So you should be able to see that. And I'll give you just another minute to post any questions that you guys have. So I think I must have done a great job because I'm not seeing any questions. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking this time. And, there is so much I want to share with you. Part of my mission in life is to help parents to educate their children at home and to help them realize that learning can happen and it can be this joyful, natural, wonderful experience. And so please be sure to check out that course, pick it up. And if you get it in the next 24 hours, you're going to get that special bonus of those reflection and tip sheets to just take your learning to the next level. So I'm so thankful to have been here with you and spent this time together. And, email me with questions. I'd be happy to answer them. All right. See you soon.